How's it going, folks? Graham Houston Matthews here, and welcome back to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch in the WWE Network. I apologize for this video going up late today. I'm recording this about 7 o'clock at night on Tuesday. Hopefully this will be up before the end of Tuesday. I know the hashtag AskGSM video didn't go up until, I think, earlier this morning. I tried to load it all of Monday. It didn't go up. Long story short, I was camping. Internet connection sucked. But we are back here, though, on WrestleRant. Like I said, today we're breaking down every single SummerSlam event in the history of the pay-per-view from 1988 to 2014. Today we're talking about the 2004 installment, which I watched late last week. Was going to record this over the weekend. Just couldn't find the time. I was out on a kind of a mini vacation, but still though, very fun watching this show. I thought it was a pretty good show, especially compared to the kind of disappointing 2003 installment, but without further ado, let's kick it off. So, opening the show, a six-man tag team match. The Dudleys, Bubba Ray Dudley, Devon Dudley, and Spike Dudley team together to take on the trio of Rey Mysterio, Billy Kidman, and Paul London. So, a really, really fun match. It kind of seems random on paper, but it was a really well-wrestled match for the time they were given, only about 8 minutes. But within storyline, it did make sense that Spike Dudley, I guess, was the quote-unquote leader of the Dudley faction at this period in time. He was kind of mind-controlling the Dudley Boys, who were also kind of riding off of Paul Heyman. Only a month before the Great American Bash pay-per-view where they lost to The Undertaker, then Paul Bearer got buried in cement. That's another story for another day. I actually talked about that in my Great American Bash '04 review, which we plug last summer if you want to check that out. But anyway, Spike Dudley kind of comes in the picture. He's the Cruiserweight Champion at this time after helping with some help from the Dudley Boys winning that championship from Rey Mysterio, I believe it was. So Mysterio enlisting the help of Billy Kidman and Paul London to take on the Dudley Boys in six-man tag team action. So as I mentioned, a good match, nothing too stellar, but I love the chemistry. The Dudleys are always awesome. No surprise there. But Rey Mysterio had some really, really good chemistry with the tag team of Billy Kidman and Paul London. A very underrated duo, in my personal opinion, over on the SmackDown brand. I mean, I know a lot of people remember Paul London for his time with Brian Kendrick from '07 to, or '06 maybe, to 2008 before Paul London left the company later that year. But Paul London really did have a great career as a cruiserweight over in the SmackDown brand early on before he joined Brian Kendrick, years before that, starting with Billy Kidman. So a really good match to kick off the show. The Dudley Boys picking up the win. After that, a Till Death Do Us Part match between Kane and Matt Hardy. So Matt Hardy coming back from injury, coming over to Raw, kind of very akin to the Edge storyline, but this was within storyline. This was kayfabe. The Edge stuff was real a year later. But Matt Hardy comes back. I believe he's a heel in this scenario. I couldn't really tell. But Matt Hardy and Lita were an item in real life. They were kind of playing off that in the storyline. And in his absence, Kane had apparently impregnated Lita. So in this match, the winner was given the right to marry Lita. So that's what the whole Till Death Do Us Part stipulation was all about. Really stupid, really kind of typical, the quintessential sports entertainment, drama storyline with a soap opera storyline, something like that, But the match was good, though. I mean, it really wasn't anything too noteworthy. I mean, it was only 6 minutes long. But Kane and Matt Hardy, respectively, are two very good workers. They had a good match. Kane, in the end, winning clean, which was kind of surprising. I mean, this was not during the Edge storyline where Matt Hardy was kind of like a breakout star. Matt Hardy, they didn't really see him as a top star at any point during his run. Unfortunately, I think he could have been a top star over on SmackDown, but at least during this feud, they never really felt the need to protect him, hence why Kane went over in this scenario. But still, Kane wins, he earns the right to marry Lita, and that was that, and also kind of leading into the whole, Kane and Lita and Edge storyline that would culminate about a year later also, which would also tie into Matt Hardy, this whole massive love triangle, or love square, I guess you can call it, with Lita, Edge, Matt Hardy, and Kane, and the rest is history from that point forward. After that, for the United States Championship, a match one of best of 5 series for that title between John Cena and Booker T. Now, I think I was talking about this with Jamie Lee Mack on a recent episode of WrestleRant Radio. It's been a very, very long time since they last did a best of 5, best of 7 series in WWE. We see them all the time in TNA. And I love that kind of stipulation because it kind of spreads out over the course of a few weeks. It gives you a few pay-per-view matches, throwing a stipulation here or there. It can kind of get predictable by the end, but if you know how to book it and you have a story attached to it, much like the recent series of matches between the Wolves and the Dirty Heels, Austin Aries and Bobby Roode, which was tremendous. Loved every single one of those matches. it can really be effective and be very entertaining to watch. And I thought the best of 5 series between John Cena, kind of an up-and-comer at this period in time, was already a United States champion. Had won the belt, of course, from Big Show at WrestleMania and dropped it without being pinned in I think an 8-man challenge or something like that, whatever it was called, to Booker T, leading to this best of 5 series, which John Cena would win in the first match. A good match. The finish kind of came out of nowhere. John Cena, or Booker T, was kind of gloating after hitting a bookend or an axe kick or whatever. He did the spinneroonie, and out of nowhere, John Cena gets up, hits him with the FU, and picks up the win. So kind of an abrupt ending, but it did kind of play up how cocky Booker T was and how his being cocky kind of cost him in the end. But still a good match, and kind of the takeaway from this, like as I mentioned, is that they should bring back the best of 5, best of 7 series. It doesn't have to be for a tag team. It doesn't have to be over the U.S. Championship, although it would be perfect. Not only considering John Cena took part in one over 10 years ago at this point, with Booker T, but with the U.S. Championship going on right now, I mean, at this point, it looks like he's facing Seth Rollins in a title unification match, which I think is so unnecessary, but whatever. I feel like it is well overdue that we bring back the best of 5, best of 7 series, whether it be, like I said, for the tag team, U.S., IC, hell, even for the Divas title. I just want to see that stipulation back. Personal opinion. After that, for the Intercontinental Championship, we had a triple threat match between Edge, Chris Jericho, and Batista. So entertaining in more ways than one. It was a fine match, but it was really funny too, because I remember watching Edge's documentary, the second one, not the first one, the one that came out after he retired a couple years ago, back in 2011. The Edge's story or whatever it is. It's on the network, and I watched the documentary portion maybe 2 years ago or so, and I had no idea about this. I wasn't really too informed. I hadn't been watching old pay-per-views, so I had no idea. But Edge talked about in his documentary about how on this show, which took place in Toronto, this crowd was freaking awesome, by the way. But by far the best part about this show was the Toronto crowd, as the commentator is dubbed Bizarro World, which Jerry Lawler still calls it to this day, Bizarro World. You could say the same thing about Chicago or the UK or Philly or New York, whatever, but Canada has always been an awesome crowd, so shout out to my Canadian peeps out there. But this is kind of where it all started. I mean, Canada has always been an amazing crowd. You go back to WrestleMania 6 in 1990, 14 years before this. That was one of my favorite WrestleManias, if only for that great crowd and the amazing atmosphere that it caused for that event. But in this show, going back to what I was saying before, though, Edge mentioned in his documentary how the tides really started to turn on this night. And they even announced them when he came out. Lillian Garcia said, "Toronto's own Edge." And it wasn't a negative reaction, because I know Edge mentioned in the documentary, they started booing me during the match, even though I was the hometown boy. And that was kind of a telltale sign to me that it was time to turn heel and kind of let my inner villain come out, whatever. And just kind of start going with it and kind of let my anger get the best of me or whatever, kind of motivate me to become a great heel, whatever, and become the most hated man in the industry. And I didn't really notice it when he came out. Excuse me. He didn't really get an overwhelming bad reaction, a negative response from the audience. It wasn't until during the match that I noticed it. That whenever Jericho was on offense, or even Batista, he was the guy that people didn't really care about at this point in time. But Jericho, although he was the heel in this scenario, I believe, he was still getting booed beyond belief. Edge, although he was had just come back, he was drafted to Raw, won the IC title, a conquering hero. They booed the crap out of him on the show. It was so funny to see, and that didn't really help the fact that he won. I mean, in his case, and the crowd cheering him, that did not win over the audience at all. It was a good triple threat, and I enjoyed it. But I thought the biggest highlight, or the most notable part about this contest was that Edge was being booed beyond belief, which would be for the better, as he always did his best work as a heel. I enjoyed his mini face run in late 2011 and early 2010 as well. But there's, needless to say, there's no comparison between his face character and his heel character. He just kind of ran with it, and that kind of worked out for the best for him in the end. I believe he got injured. Was he the one that got injured? Maybe, I think it was, but he got injured and he couldn't defend the IC title at Unforgiven. Pretty sure that was him on this night. They ended up booking Christian and Jericho on Unforgiven. Maybe I might be mistaken. Maybe it was Jericho that got injured. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, like I mentioned, the biggest takeaway from this match was how Edge was booed out of the building during the match, and it was so funny to watch and kind of see what he would later become. After that, we had Kurt Angle taking on Eddie Guerrero, a standard singles match, no championship on the line, a WrestleMania rematch or rematch for the ages. Luther Reigns, who never ever did anything for me. I kind of talked about him a little bit in my Great American Bash 2004 review also, so another cheap plug for that review right here in the channel from last summer if you want to go back and check it out. It's about 100 editions ago. I don't know exactly what number it was. I'm not going to put a link to it, but if you want to check it out, just type in Great American Bash 04 review on YouTube, or type in GSM at the end of it, and it should come up. But anyway, this man, Luther Reigns is what I was talking about. Yeah, he never really did anything for me. Even as the manager, I thought he wasn't impressive. He was just kind of bland. But anyway, the match itself was really, really good. Maybe even better than their WrestleMania match. They weren't given a ton of time. The next 3 matches would get more time than this one was, which was kind of disappointing. The finishing sequence was a little bit rushed, and like I mentioned, they could have given them more time. But it was still a really, really good match. And maybe it was because the dynamic in this match was a little bit different. They had more time to develop the feud, and Angle costing Eddie the WWE title and whatever, and Angle coming back from injury. So maybe that's why I enjoyed this match more than I did their previous match at WrestleMania 20 of that year, because in that match, Eddie was the champion already. He was the defending champion. People were happy that it went over. It was a very well-wrestled match. But it wasn't like he was in chase mode. Angle as the heel was in chase mode. It was a very weird dynamic. A really good match, just the feud itself kind of felt a little strange. So giving it more time to kind of develop, Angle costing Eddie that championship, leading to the rematch in the show, was very well done. It made me, it piqued my interest more than it did in their previous encounter at WrestleMania. So not only that, but as I mentioned, a very well wrestled match. In the end, it was Kurt Angle going over clean in the end with a submission, a clean tap-out victory from Kurt Angle, and I'm sure it would extend the feud. Did they do Team Angle and Team Eddie at Survivor Series? I feel like they did. I don't remember exactly. I never watched Survivor Series before. I'm sure I will, in a couple months when it comes time for Survivor Series. But I don't think I reviewed it last year in my batch of reviews that I did for Survivor Series. But I feel like this was not the end of the feud, but I feel like it eventually culminated at Survivor Series. I could be wrong about that, and I guess we'll find out in due time. But I'm sure other people do know about that and can let me know in the comments. So after that, we had Triple H versus Eugene. Yes, Eugene was Triple H's opponent, which was kind of disappointing. I mean, Eugene is a very fun character, but you can only go so far with a mentally challenged character. I mean, you feel bad for him, whatever. He's very fun, kind of copying Legends moves and stuff like that. People loved him. But, I don't know, being lovable will only get you so far, I feel like. The same thing is, it's not an exact comparison, but I feel like much like ZZ on Tough Enough, the kind of lovable character will only get you so far. And Eugene was a good worker, but he was saddled with such a stupid and offensive gimmick. He had the character down pat, but this is something that would never fly in today's WWE, especially with all the Special Olympic stuff that WWE does and whatever, nor should it ever return. But for what it was, at the time, people looked at it as acceptable, and it was funny. Eugene was a fun character, although it was offensive to many, and it was kind of a bit tasteless at times. He did have that character down pat, so I applaud him for that. But they did put together a good match, as good of a match as you would expect from Eugene and Triple H. I mean, Triple H more than held his own here. He did a very good job of kind of making this match feel bigger than it probably should have. And the whole reason why I kind of began to begin with, and I think it was also the year before, or maybe it was the next year. I think they did Angle and Eugene at SummerSlam. I don't remember watching that when I watched SummerSlam 03. I'm pretty sure that was it was Angle and Lesnar at SummerSlam 03, so I'm sure that came the following year. So Angle goes from facing Brock Lesnar and Eddie at SummerSlam to facing Eugene. Again, a good worker, a lot like Santino in the sense that he's a really good worker, but the gimmick itself really limited in terms of what he could do. Kind of most of the match was him hitting the rock bottom and the leg drop and the stunner and stuff like that, kind of copying his favorite Legends maneuvers and whatever. And he was an honorary member of Evolution. So there was a story there. It was a basic story, but it was a story nonetheless. And it was kind of a transitional period for Triple H, who would eventually get back into the world title picture and beat Orton for that belt the very next month in Unforgiven, which I did not agree with. But you could tell this was kind of a filler feud for Triple H. Not fitting of a SummerSlam billing, but still, for what it was, they did enjoy it. They did the best they could with it, and they put together a better-than-expected match. I will say that much, and at least the right person went over, and with it being Triple H. After that, for the WWE Championship, we had John Bradshaw Layfield defending the gold against The Undertaker. A fine match, and I think also I forgot to mention with the Angle and Eddie match, Angle is getting more cheers than Eddie, which was funny. I mean, again, Bizarro World, which is what the crowd called it. But in this match, you had the crowd chanting Spanish Table, which I thought was hysterical, because they wanted to see Undertaker put JBL to the table at ringside. And JBL, there's a lot of polarizing opinions on whether he was a really good or a really bad champion. Just regardless of what you thought as a guy as champion in his year-long reign, people wanted to see him get his ass kicked, and that's essentially what he was successful at during his year-long reign as WWE champion. And you have to give the guy credit. I mean, it wasn't his fault that he was kind of shoved into the main event spotlight as quickly as he was. Literally, within a matter of months, was he shoehorned into the WWE title picture. Not even months, but rather weeks. You know, he went from being a tag team guy in the APA to contending for the WWE title, and ultimately winning that championship mere weeks into his quest to win that gold. They didn't win the belt at Judgment Day, but he would ultimately win it at the Great American Bash pay-per-view the very next month. But anyway, though, just the way that he was booked and the way that he would try to escape from everything, this was kind of around the time he was building the cabinet. Orlando Jordan was in his corner for this match, and in the end, JBL would get himself disqualified. I forgot whether it was via interference or whatever. I watched this a couple days ago. Like I said, I don't remember exactly, but it was kind of a lackluster finish. It was not a good match. JBL and Undertaker, I mean, kind of JBL talks about all the time. I was in the ring for the Undertaker. We had really good matches. Maybe the last Ride That match they had, a No Mercy that year, was better than this. I don't know. I mean, it was kind of obvious the feud was continuing past this point. This was really only the start of the WWE title feud. But, you know, like I said with, you know, past earlier SummerSlam reviews, it was more acceptable back in the late 80s and early 90s to do a DQ or a countout finish in a title match, whatever. I'm still not a fan of it, but I could see why it was more acceptable back then. In 2004, we were kind of past that point, where if you had a WWE or a world title match, or any title match, you know, mind you, let alone the WWE Championship, much less at SummerSlam, it was kind of disappointing. I could see why they did it. Ultimately, Undertaker took out JBL in the end, so he was kind of like the last man standing, setting the stage for their future rematches over that championship, but still kind of a lackluster finish to an otherwise mediocre match, in my opinion. So we get to the main event, and probably what was the best match of the night, hands down, other than Angle and Eddie, which I thought was really good, but, you know, I think the only thing that worked against them was the time. I think they could have used more time. This match I thought was very, very good, and they got great time. They made the most of it between Randy Orton and Thou Who Shall Not Be Named, or I mean, I will name in this case. It's WrestleRant. It's not WWE here, folks. Chris Benoit defending his World Heavyweight Championship against Randy Orton. A match, I mean, again, I was not watching back then, so I have no idea, but I would love to hear from people that were fans back then, which I'm sure is many of you, because I have not been watching that long, which is very well documented, whether people thought this match was actually going to close the show. It's not like Orton won the Royal Rumble, where he, at that time, where it still meant something to win the Rumble, you had your WWE title match in the main event of WrestleMania. That didn't happen with Randy Orton. He just won a number one contenders match on Raw, and they could have easily slotted this match, you know, second to last, third to last. But I guess then again, if you look at the alternatives, every other match had a heel going over. JBL, you know, or the Undertaker rather, got himself disqualified. Not JBL. It was still a DQ finish nonetheless. It was a fuck finish. And so I guess he didn't want to go off the air with that. That would have been even worse for that match. And then Triple H and Eugene is obviously not going to main event. Angle and Eddie I could see making a case for, but with the championship not on line, I could see why they wouldn't want to do that. So and also Orton winning the big one too was a huge moment, which was best saved for the main event. But I'm wondering whether people thought it was actually going to go on last, and if Orton had a shot of winning, because I know Orton was on the fast track to superstardom at this period in time. He was, he had that very long reign as Intercontinental Champion from December of 2003 to July. He had just dropped the Intercontinental Championship right before becoming number one contender to the World Championship. And, you know, as he said in his DVD, and they said in Triple H's DVD, and Batista's DVD, everyone's DVD, they talked about how Orton, they thought, was going to be the guy, you know, the prototypical guy, the face of the company, and it didn't really work out that way, whether it was because he wasn't over enough, or whether it was because they kind of fucked him over in the booking, which I thought they did it Unforgiven. They took the title off of him way too quick. They kind of hot-shotted the split from Evolution and whatever. It happened way too quickly. I don't think they ever really planted the seeds beforehand. I might be mistaken. I don't really know, but just from what I've seen anyway. But anyway, going back to the match itself, a really, really good match from Randy Orton and Chris Benoit. Very well wrestled. Benoit in his home state, and you know, of his home turf in Canada. Didn't have the same feel as the Backlash match did. I know that match also took place in Canada, the triple threat match for the World Championship, one of my favorite matches that I've had to watch, that I've had to watch on the network, not had to watch, but that I have watched on the network all year long, from Backlash of that year between him, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels. Again, I'm not going to get into it right here. Whether that match was better than the WrestleMania match, up for debate, but just the atmosphere alone made that match more special than, in some respects, in the WrestleMania match because it was his home turf. You didn't get that same reaction. You didn't get that same reaction here. Rather, you could hear the fans kind of cheering on Orton. It was probably the smart marks. You wanted to see him win the championship, kind of see a fresh face in the title picture. He was, Chris Benoit was not the sole fan favorite here. There was a portion of the audience that was excited to see Randy Orton win that championship. But regardless, though, a really, really good match closing off the show with a major moment. Randy Orton, the new World Heavyweight Champion, as I mentioned, kind of setting the stage for a split from Evolution, losing the title a mere month later to Triple H at Unforgiven, and they never really... And I know the long-term plan was to have him win it back at WrestleMania 21 that year, or the following year, rather. But just because Batista ended up getting over more organically than Orton did, they went with him as the guy at that period in time before they shipped him over to SmackDown, as opposed to Orton. So Orton never really got his vengeance over Triple H at that period in time. Not until like a couple years later when they feuded in 08 and 07 and 09 and 2010, every single year from that year on, from every year from that point forward. But still, a great way to go off the show and a major moment in the career, a major milestone in the career of Randy Orton. So, on the whole, I thought this was a good show. Like I mentioned, probably one of the bigger highlights coming out of the show was the crowd. I thought was great. The Canadian crowds, the Canadian crowds are always awesome. This show was no exception. Probably one of my favorite events to emanate from Canada, because the crowd on this show was, as the commentators mentioned on multiple occasions, it was quote-unquote bizarro world. They were cheering for the heels and chanting weird things. I thought it was hilarious. Oh, also, I forgot to mention this too. We had a Diva dodgeball match, which was so pointless. I mean, it's so amazing to see how far women's wrestling, just the treatment of women in WWE has come in the last 10 years. Like, that was so stupid, I'm not even going to say it was awful. Just why? Why would you have a Diva dodgeball match and not a women's championship match or something like that? Just the state of women's wrestling. I know you had Trish and Lita. People kind of romanticized about that period in time. Yes, you actually had characters as opposed to today. And we're kind of getting that back a little bit with the NXT women and Paige as a character and the Bella Twins. And we're kind of getting that back. But the wrestling back then was really bad. And when they didn't have matches, I mean, other than the matches that Trish and Lita had, the wrestling was not phenomenal. It was better in the Ruthless Aggression era as opposed to during the Attitude Era, hands down, infinitely better. But you still, from during the Ruthless Aggression era, we can't count those out. The bras and panties matches, the Divas dodgeball. Would it be entertaining for a male viewer? Absolutely. But it did nothing to change the perception of women in WWE. That was kind of disgusting to watch. But still served its purpose. Not really, but that was kind of a waste of time. And thankfully, it was short and sweet for the most part. But yeah, on the show, on the whole, I enjoyed this show much more than the 2003 installment, which I thought was kind of disappointing. This show did not have more, star-studded matches. Not nearly as good as 2002. No, like great matches. I thought the main event was really, really good. The rest of the show didn't have a really, really good match, but they were good for the most part, making for a rather solid show. A fine opener to kick off the show. A fun opener between the Dudleys, Rey Mysterio, Billy Kidman, and Paul London. Kane and Matt Hardy, fine for what it was. They could have used more time, but again, the stipulation was silly, but it was a fine match, though. Cena and Booker T, a good match that put over John Cena in a big way. Edge, Jericho, and Batista, a fun triple threat in more ways than one, as I mentioned earlier. Angle and Eddie, a great wrestling match. That probably was the sole great match. Again, I don't know if Angle and Eddie was better than the main event. That's kind of up for debate, but both of those matches were really, really good. Triple H and Eugene, better than expected. Not amazing, but better than expected. I'll give it that much. And then JBL and Undertaker, kind of a flat match, but the crowd made that match entertaining with all the tables chants, or the Spanish table chants, rather. Not just any ordinary tables chants, but chants for the Spanish table to get destroyed by Undertaker and JBL in that match. But go back and watch this event on the WWE Network, and also be sure to check out all the other reviews that I've done for past SummerSlam shows right here on the channel. My reviews of, as I mentioned before, 1988, 2002, 2008, 2011, 2013, already up here on the channel from last summer. Go back and check them out. Just type in SummerSlam, whatever year it is, review, GSM in the YouTube search, or WrestleRant, whatever, and it should be one of the first results that comes up. But we are on track, though. As I mentioned, this will be going up late on Tuesday because I just haven't had the time to record. I apologize for that. We should be good going forward. But if All is on track for the next couple of weeks until SummerSlam on the 23rd, which I will be in attendance for. I don't know if, if I've mentioned that yet. But anyway, this Saturday, though, I will be reviewing SummerSlam 2005 before breaking down SummerSlam 2006 on Sunday. 07 next Tuesday. The following weekend is SummerSlam 09 and 2010. That Tuesday, maybe I am missing something. I feel like I'm missing a show here that I forgot to cover. 09 2010 is next weekend, or the weekend after that. I don't even know. We'll figure it out as we go along, but still, I'm looking forward to watching these shows and breaking them down with you guys right here on the channel. So without further ado, in the meantime and in between time, you guys can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant, on Facebook at facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Be sure to check out the website nextitterwrestling.net and all the description, all the links and stuff that I'm mentioning. If you did not hear them, I'm going too fast for you, whatever, which I've been known to do. It is down in the description box below. Last but not least, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. As I mentioned, guys, I'll be back on Saturday with my full review of SummerSlam 2005. Catch you folks then.